To begin, what are your thoughts on bugs? Do they make you shiver? Do they gross you out? Do you simply just want to squash them? Do you like to play with them? Normally, most people think they're just pests. Today, we're going to look at the next portion in Revelation, which records a plague of locusts, a plague of bugs. But before we do that, let's look at the timeline of Revelation's tribulation period and where we are at the present. We have already gone over the first 7 seals, which took us to the center point in the 7-year tribulational period. So we're in the middle of the 3.5 years, and we know from other passages that this is the time where the Antichrist sets himself in the temple and proclaims himself to be God. The 144,000 Israeli spiritual army has already been sealed, and now they are openly proclaiming the gospel and winning souls, and Christ is having or gaining a multitude from every nation, tribe, tongue, and nation in heaven, which we saw, or John saw in chapter 7. So here we're on this half now. So zooming in to this half, the seventh seal was opened, and the scroll was opened, in which revealed 7 trumpets being given to 7 angels. And these trumpets were going to be battle signals for God's army to take back creation. And before that happens, in chapter 8, we saw that prayer, after the seal was broken, there was silence, we saw that prayer was added to the saints' prayers from the angels. And it was a prayer that God would delay his full wrath in order to make his power known and his strength known, and that others may repent. And remember, this is simultaneous to the ministry of the 144,000 spiritual army who is going out and evangelizing the whole world. But, however, we also saw that the earth is now the recipient of God's wrath upon its sin and rebellion. The fire from the altar was thrown down to earth, and that has now become the place of punishment. So the second half of chapter 8 contained the 4 trumpet blasts, which signaled catastrophic destruction upon the earth, specifically on the vegetation, on the sea life and ships, on the freshwater supply, and on the light/air. And it was always a third. These 4 things showed that the very basic needs, necessities of man, the things that we depend on, are all given to us by God. And they're not guaranteed to us. It should shake the core of the people who live in them. And many aspects of these 4 areas of creation, man has created an idol out of them, has made their life's purpose and their life's goal to serve or worship these things, in having these things as their greatest treasure, their greatest goal, and their greatest happiness, instead of the Creator, worshiping the creation instead of the Creator. And so when God destroys a third of the vegetation, and a third of the sea life in the ships, a third of the fresh water, and a third of the light is taken out because of air quality, it shows that these things in nature are outside of our control. Doesn't matter how many trees we plant or how many things we try to save, it's ultimately in God's hands. And God is the one who provides. So when he took away a third, that was proof of God's goodness, because he's giving time for people to repent. He's giving that wake-up call, the last wake-up call, the last shake. It is a partial harming instead of a total destruction, which is due us because of sin and rebellion. So this morning, we're going to look at the 5th trumpet blast, which is a plague of locusts. And we're going to look at chapter 8, verses 13 through 9:12. Our text this morning is going to be divided into 3 sections. The first contains the introduction to the next 3 plagues, which is in 8:13. So let's go ahead and read that one. Then I looked, and I heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, saying with a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the three angels who were about to sound. Now, first, it's interesting. I love always John is looking and hearing at the same time. He's seeing lots of things, and he's specifically mentioning what he's hearing. Well, here, he's hearing an eagle flying in mid-heaven. Now, in biblical language, biblical ideas, the first heaven is our atmosphere. It's the sky. Second heaven is the terrestrial. It's where the stars are. The third heaven is where God is, beyond that. So when we say here an eagle is flying in the mid-heaven, it's outside the earth's atmosphere. So he's flying, and his voice is now being carried not to a specific spot on earth, but the message is going out to the entire earth. Now, the word here for eagle in Greek can mean an eagle, or it can mean a vulture. It could mean either one. They're both symbols of swiftness. They're both birds of prey. They both fly high above, and thus they're viewed as being unstoppable. But if this is a vulture, if that's what the idea is here, it also has an additional connotation of death that's coming. Now, this does happen later on in Revelation, especially during the second coming, where Christ comes back. He calls all the birds of prey to come and feast on those who have been judged. So what does this eagle or vulture pronounce or speak out? He says, woe, woe, woe. Woe is an onomatopoetic word. It's an exclamation. In Greek, it's literally Oi, oi, we almost want to say. It's a sound that conveys the idea. It's kind of like saying in English when we say moo, M-O-O. It's the sound the cow makes, but it's a word. So same thing here. It expresses a strong emotion of sorrow, pain, and anger. It connotes the inevitable ends of those who forsake God and live self-sufficiently. It announces both judgment and disaster. And the word woe in Greek is used as an opposite of blessed. So when Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the poor in spirit, the opposite of that is woe to them who are not. So it's a connotation of not a blessing, but a curse. So here, he says it 3 times. Now, it does correspond to the next 3 trumpets, but also, as we know, that's probably referring to a triple-decker, going in more of a superlative idea, with the idea of these next 3 trumpets will be worse plagues of judgment than before. These are going to be the worst things ever faced. And remember, in the first 3 trumpets, things were pretty bad. So these next 3 trumpets that the angels are about to sound will be battle signals that direct God's army to do specific tasks. The next verse begins the next section. But it's important to realize that the introduction to these next 3 plagues didn't have to happen. John didn't have to write down an introduction. So why does he do it? This introduction interprets for us the next 3 trumpets as being great terror that's about to come. And like I said, it's quite amazing given what has already transpired with a third of creation being destroyed, and plants and sea and water and air. So what we're looking forward to is things that are even worse. And verses 1 through 11 of chapter 9 is really the bulk of our message today, and it's the 5th trumpet's plague, which is a plague of locusts. Now, this passage is filled with details that describe aspects of locusts. But how do we understand them? How should we understand them? This is quite difficult. There's 2 major options, as I see it in the text. One, we can take them as literal locusts, and thus influenced by demons, because we're specifically going to be talking about the abyss, and the abyss being opened, and thus the demons being released. Or, specifically, these are demons that are appearing to John metaphorically as locusts and doing damage, but John sees them as a locust, but there's no such literally locusts on the earth. Now, if it was a metaphor, it'd be something that would be similar to what we saw in chapter 5, where John sees Jesus in the throne room, but he doesn't see him as a man, he sees him as a lamb that was slain, but yet with 7 horns and 7 eyes. So he would see the image of Jesus, and the image of the lamb would convey his importance or what he's doing. But the important thing to notice there is that when John sees those things, specifically of Jesus, it's in heaven. But here, the locust that he's seeing is going to be on earth. I favor a literal interpretation, that these are literal locusts that are being influenced by demons. And there's 2 reasons why. Number one, up until now, this has been the case. The angels or demons, once they're signaled from heaven, go out and influence or alter something in the literal physical world. All of the seals and all of the trumpets thus far, that's what happened. So it would be strange here if that didn't happen. And then number 2, there are too many details about locusts for all to convey a metaphorical meaning or significance. The things that John are about to say correspond so well with locusts that it wouldn't make sense of what would it convey or communicate to us about demons. So, it sounds kind of weird. Demon-possessed locusts or demon-influenced locusts. How are we reconciling this? Do we have any examples of this? Let me share you a story. Jesus went into a region across the Sea of Galilee, and he met a demon-possessed man. And when Jesus was speaking with him, he learned that it was a legion of demons within this man. And the man was crazy. And the people around that area knew he was crazy. And he used to live out in the tombs. He used to howl in the night, cut himself with stones. And Jesus cast out those demons. But before he did, the demons begged that he would not send him to the abyss, but send him into that herd of pigs that were off in the way. And Jesus allowed them to go. He commanded them, said, go. And they went into the pigs. And the pigs went crazy. And they went straight down the hill, off the cliff, into the Sea of Galilee, and died. It brought death to the pigs. And it caused the people of that city to then see their loss in their pigs and see Jesus as a threat and would not let him speak or come in the city. They begged him to leave. So the demons caused the people to focus on their material loss, and they did not see the potential gain in Christ. In the same way, I think that idea best explains what we have in this passage with the locusts, is that they're literal creatures that are controlled by literal demonic forces. And thus they are going to do strange things that are destructive, because that is the nature of demons. Okay, so with that in place, let's now turn to the text and view what's going on. The first 2 verses tells us about the source of the plague, verses 1 and 2. Let's read those. Then the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star from heaven which had fallen to earth, and the key of the bottomless pit was given to him. He opened the bottomless pit, and smoke went up out of the pit, like smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by the smoke of the pit. So we have an angelic creature with the 5th trumpet sounded, and then another angel falls from heaven to the earth. Now we know that the stars we've seen represent angels. Here we know specifically that it's an angel because the key was given to him, not to it. So here we have an angel from God. Now many commentators see that fallen and automatically assume this is negative. But when we're talking about angels in heaven, the word for falling doesn't necessarily have to have a negative connotation. It can simply mean to descend. And here we need to remember it's probably not a demon or even Satan, because a key is given to him, the key of the abyss, the prison, in which later on Satan is going to be cast into. And later on in Revelation 20, there's a holy angel that has that key in chain and binds Satan. So it seems like it very well could be the same angel in Revelation 20 as it is in here. Either way, I believe this is a holy angel that's coming down and a key to the bottomless pit was given to him. Key symbolizes authority. The pit that's mentioned here, it's a word for well, a vertical shaft that's covered by a stone. And it's described as being bottomless, or literally the pit of the abyss, which connotes that it's immensely deep, so much so that you can't even see the bottom. And thus, the idea is it's bottomless. In ancient literature, it's associated with the sea, something that you can't find the bottom of it. It's bottomless sea. And thus, it became known because of the sea, that it's in chaos and always in turmoil. It's without peace. And thus, it became a place of the dead, of the prison for the demons or the underworld. In Revelation, it's always associated with demonic activity rising up from the abyss. We see here demons coming out. We see the beast that comes out of the abyss. And later on, we see Satan and his demons being held captive in the abyss. Here, notice that the key was given to the angel. What does that tell us about God's control? It's that God is in control of all of these demonic forces. Although they're rebellious, God limits their freedom. So here, God is giving them limited abilities and limited freedom. And we know that certain demons are imprisoned. Luke 8:31, 2 Peter, and in Jude talks about certain angels being put in eternal bonds until the day of judgment. So this is not a different concept. But here, they're being released. And when the pit is opened, you see great smoke, like a furnace. So there's a ton of smoke coming up. And what does that seem to imply, especially with a furnace, like a furnace? It seems to imply the fires within the pit, the place of punishment, the place of torment. And in a very literary way, that opening brings about, not light, but brings about darkness. So the connotation is that bad things are about to happen because this pit is opened. And further, we see the pit, the bottomless pit, and connoting that demons are about to come. But at the same time, the pit also draws on the life cycle of the locust. This is a picture of locust eggs. And locust eggs are laid 3 to 4 inches below the surface. And usually there's about 100 eggs. So what does this look like to you? Like a well, a shaft, where that covering is open and these things are going to come out. So I think there's a double image at work here. There's an intentional mixture of the literal locust and the demonic forces. So that's the source of the plague. The source is coming from the pits of hell. These are demon-influenced. And the destructive forces that God is releasing, they have freedom to harm humanity. And it's going to be in the form of locusts. So in verses 3 through 10, though, we have the identity of the plague, which is specifically the locusts. And in verses 3 through 5, we have their mission stated. Let's look at that. Then out of the smoke came locusts upon the earth, and power was given to them, as the scorpions of the earth have power. They were told not to hurt the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but only the men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were not permitted to kill anyone, but to torment for 5 months. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings a man. So what I have pictured here is, this is from a plague that happened in 1915 in Palestine. And you're going to see the mass of locusts that came there. But go back to the text of verse 3. It said that out of the smoke, out of what was rising out of the pits of hell, come these locusts.